Father's Day is coming up soon, so on this week's episode, we're going to talk about 3 of the most famous dads in all of metal, talk about the great things that they do as fathers, maybe a couple of their failings, and the role of fathers more generally in the metal community. Join me. Welcome, metalheads. I'm the host of Heavy Metal Philosophy and writer for Metal Digest, John Barbas. Make sure you stick around to the end of the episode for this week's Riff of the Week. Every episode I talk about being the host of the podcast and a writer and all that, but this week we'll talk about another title of mine, Father. But I'm only going to spend a little bit of the time talking about myself. We're also going to talk about 3 people in metal who have made a huge impact on the scene in general, but probably just as big of an impact on their sons and daughters. We're talking James Hetfield, Corey Taylor, and George Corpsegrinder Fisher, 3 of the most famous frontmen in all of metal, but there's some people that just call them dad. Metalhead dads break the stereotype of metalheads in general. We metalheads aren't always nihilistic misanthropes. Being fathers gives us the chance to show that we can be loving, caring, supportive, and great role models while we talk about dismembering people. So for our first famous metalhead dad, let's talk about James Hetfield. When James was very young, his dad just left, just straight up dipped, didn't even say goodbye. And then his mother died of cancer 3 years later, leaving him utterly alone, and I think that had a profound impact on him as a musician, songwriter, person, and father. No doubt the man has probably made many mistakes in his life, but one thing he wasn't going to be is absent in his children's lives after the experience that he went through. It affected him so much that not only did he make sure that he was going to be there, and not only did he limit the touring that Metallica did in his later career so that he could be at home, but also he took part in a documentary called Absent that dealt with the terrible suffering that people go through when they have absent fathers. He was asked about the documentary and he wanted to be deeply involved, and I can only imagine it's his past trauma that motivated him so much to want to be a part of it. There's some really powerful scenes in this documentary, and in interviews about it, there's some powerful quotes from Hetfield. He expresses the stress and anxiety that he went through as a father because he didn't have a father to teach him how to be a father. So he didn't know if he was doing it correctly. He didn't know how to properly raise his children. I can definitely relate to that. I had a father and I didn't know. So then he comes to the conclusion that the most important thing is to just be there. And I mean, I agree. I definitely agree. The most important thing is to be there. My son knows that he can count on me. But wow, we fathers have a real low bar, don't we? I can't even imagine how difficult it is to raise children properly when you're one of the world's biggest rock stars and you're constantly touring. And speaking of that, let's talk about our next famous dad, Corey Taylor. The lead singer of Slipknot had his first child when he was really young, and at that point in time in his life, he hadn't quite got his stuff together yet. He wasn't as successful as he was. He was addicted to drugs, and so therefore he wasn't there for his first child until she was 11 years old. He's open about that in interviews. And also, he didn't meet his own father until he was 30 years old. Having gone through those experiences himself and coming out on the other side of addiction now that he's recovered from that, he's doing his best to make amends with his oldest child, and he's trying his best to be there for his next 2 children that he had. None of us are perfect, and we've all made mistakes, especially when we were young. So to try and correct that, especially when you're rich and you don't have to, is very admirable. You can see Corey all the time sharing on social media his experiences with his son and his young daughter, and he supports his son's band, and that's got to be a hard balance to cover there too. It must be really hard because on the one hand, there's always going to be naysayers, and he doesn't want people to say, oh, you only made it because of your father. But on the other hand, it's super hard to make it in the music business, period. So if you have any sort of privilege or advantage, you would be a fool not to take it. I have to admit, when I heard about Vended playing on Knotfest, I was like, yeah, of course, that Corey's son gets a spot on Knotfest. But then I saw an interview with him and he said, if you were in my position, you would take this opportunity too. And I was like, he's damn right. And I totally threw that immature feeling that I had, that little minor bit of disrespect, I throw it out the window. He's absolutely right. All of us would do the same thing in his shoes. I'm sure he's doing the best that he can with what he has, the same as any of us would do. So all respect to Vended, all respect to Corey Taylor for doing his best and trying to improve his life and his family's life going forward. That's what I'm talking about. And to finish up, let's go with the most wholesome man in all of death metal, Corpsegrinder. Only us true metalheads know what a teddy bear Corpsegrinder is. Everybody on the outside, all they see is the guy that screams, "I come blood," and bring on the bloodshed, with the biggest neck in the world, making all kinds of guttural noises. But those of us who've been following him for a long time, especially if you follow him on Instagram, you know he's a big sweetheart. You know he loves his longtime wife and his 2 daughters. Nothing but wholesome content on his Instagram, nothing but him winning stuffed animals and donating them to charity, going to Target and getting toys on clearance, celebrating his daughter's accomplishments. Corpsegrinder may be dad of the year when it comes to death metal. His love of metal reminds me that there's more than one way to get into metal. I feel like people get into metal for 2 reasons. One, maybe their parents, their father in this case, just shares his or her enthusiasm for metal and it rubs off on the kids. It's something that they can share together and the children grow up to also love metal like their parents. I'm reminded of the death metal mom and her mom, and then there's other kids that are just angry. Maybe they had issues with their parents and they grew up angry and that's how they got into metal. I'm kind of a mix of both. My dad liked Judas Priest. That's about it. But he did expose me to some metal and, his love of it, it definitely rubbed off on me. But then also my own issues growing up. I was an angry kid and I got into more extreme metal. So I look at Corpsegrinder just sharing his love of classic metal and his children following along. They also love toys. It's so wholesome and heartwarming. Makes me love Corpsegrinder even more. It makes me reflect on my own job as a father. I definitely can look back and pinpoint some areas that I could have done better. But for the most part, I'm super proud of the person that my son has become, and I'm so happy that we have the relationship that we have. My son likes Metallica and Slipknot, but he's not really a metalhead the way that I am. We're very, very different people. So on the one hand, I'm happy that he appreciates good music the way that I do. And on the other hand, I'm happy that he's not an angry, pissed off, nihilistic misanthrope the way that I was when I was his age, that he can be happy and chill and relaxed and enjoy all kinds of different stuff besides the angry nonsense that I was into. So while I look back and go, oh man, I could have handled that better. I was immature here and there. For the most part, I'm like, oh man, thank you. Thank you that my son is awesome and made my job easy, because none of us are perfect and we're all doing the best that we can. So just if you are able to, which I'm blessed that I'm able to, I went and saw my father this weekend. I hope you get to go see yours. Give them a phone call if they're too far away. If you've lost your father along the way, because we're all getting older, give them a shout. Give them a shout. Appreciate what you had, because it's special and it's what made us as people. We cannot give enough credit to the dads on Father's Day. And if you had bad experiences with your father, I'm very sorry. I also know what that's like sometimes. So I want you to do your best to be the best that you can, and that will break the cycle going forward. So with that being said, we're going to conclude here. I would love it if you would tell me in the comments stories that you might have about your father getting you into metal, or maybe even your mother, like the death metal mom. That's cool as shit too. But we're also got to talk about the riff of the week. This week's riff of the week is from the Amity Affliction. The name of the song is Father and Son. Check that riff out as the episode closes. Tell me what you think. I hope you enjoy it. Click right here and you'll get another great Heavy Metal Philosophy episode if you're on YouTube. If you're audio only, links in the description. Thank you so much. Happy Father's Day coming up. But most importantly, read philosophy, listen to metal. I love you.